I call the honourable member for Hughes.
It's nice to you.
Member for Grayndler on this bill, and I'd like to congratulate him on his recent manifesto, where he said that it is not our job to sow discontent, and that is so true, Deputy Speaker. Class warfare, identity politics, sowing discontent in our nation is a shameful practice, Deputy Speaker, that should be condemned and called out at every opportunity. And for that, I congratulate the member for Grayndler. I also congratulate him for his other statement that he said, and I quote, I hope I'm quoting correctly from his manifesto. He may like to interject just in case I've got it wrong. He says, we have to engage with business, large and small. Absolutely. Again, I 100% agree with that, Deputy Speaker. But the idea that one side, Deputy Speaker, of this parliament wants to come and rip the tax cuts away, Deputy Speaker, and add an extra burden on small business, Deputy Speaker, is something that everyone in this parliament should stand up and condemn, and I congratulate the member for Grayndler on that as he leaves the chamber. Now, Deputy Speaker, back on the 15th of April 2014, the coalition government announced that the site of Sydney's new Western Sydney Airport would be at Badgerys Creek. I can remember being back in high school, back at Peakhurst High School, Deputy Speaker, back in the 1970s, and our economics teacher, Mr Simpson, who was a fantastic economics teacher, and he said to the class, and I can still recall it today, he said, there will never be another airport built in Sydney. In anyone in this classroom's lifetime, he said there will never be another airport built in Sydney, Deputy Speaker. Well, it looks as though, Deputy Speaker, that on one of the rare occasions that my economics high school teacher will be proven wrong, because the coalition is going ahead with the construction of this airport in Western Sydney. It will be a boost for the local economy. I hear the member for Penrith over there yawning, where she should be absolutely proud and be 100% behind this, Deputy Speaker. Lindsay, Deputy Speaker, I withdraw. The member for Penrith, incorrectly, it's the member for Lindsay. So I'd like to simply say that the member for Lindsay is not a rookie at all. And that's not very nice. That's not a very nice comment there from the member for the member sitting at the dispatch box. The member at the dispatch box, he should not make that inference on the member for Lindsay. I know she's trying her best, but you should not call her a rookie. Because I'm sure the member for Lindsay supports this airport because she knows that of the job creation that it will create in her local electorate and for her constituents. We're looking at something, Deputy Speaker, construction of the airport will actually add $3.6 billion infrastructure package, estimated 8,000 new jobs. 8,000 new jobs. So I'd see the two members sitting on the opposite side. A lot of those jobs will be for constituents in your electorate. And I am very happy, Deputy Speaker, that they should be here supporting this bill 100%, Deputy Speaker. But instead, Deputy Speaker, we still hear this ranting and raving, this anti-business rhetoric that we continually hear, this continual opposition for opposition's sake. However, Deputy Speaker, as we get on to the construction of a new airport in Western Sydney, there is one concern that I would like to raise, and this goes to our commitment under the Paris Climate Control Agreement. Now, under that, Deputy Speaker, we have to reduce our carbon dioxide equivalent emissions by 26 to 28% off 2005 levels by the year 2030. Now, one of the largest emissions sectors of our economy is actually in transport. It actually makes, we know by 2020, the transport sector will make up something like 18% of our nation's CO2 or greenhouse gas emissions. And of that 18%, Deputy Speaker, it looks like that domestic aviation, according to a paper here of Australia's greenhouse emissions projections for 2017 by the Department of Environment, Australia's domestic aviation CO2 emissions in 2020 will be 9 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent, but by 2030 it will have increased to 12 million tonnes. So we're looking, Deputy Speaker, at a 30% increase in the carbon emissions from our domestic aviation. And yet, under the Paris Agreement that we have, Deputy Speaker, that has to be a 26 to 28% reduction, not off 2020 levels, but off 2005 levels, Deputy Speaker. So just rough back-of-the-envelope calculations, if we are going to have every sector so-called do its share to that 28 to 26% reduction, I see we'd have to, from where we are today, rather than actually have a third increase in our domestic aviation emission with more flights, more people travelling, more overseas tourists, Deputy Speaker, we're going to have something like maybe a 40% decrease. And then this is where it gets interesting, because those mob on the other side, Deputy Speaker, their policy under the Paris Agreement is to have a 45% reduction in emissions. So I put the challenge to those that sit on that side of the chamber. Can you tell me what emissions reduction so that you want in our domestic aviation sector? What do you want? Deputy Speaker, we just heard it there. The opposition, Deputy Speaker, want to prevent Australians from travelling. That's what they want to do. They want to prevent Australians from travelling. One of the greatest rights that we have, one of the greatest improvements that we've had, that Australians can travel and visit other areas of our nation, that can all the tourism jobs that come with it. The opposition want a 45% reduction, and they would be happy, Deputy Speaker, not only to close down our new airport in Western Sydney, but they would have to close down a lot of the internal flights around this nation to meet their emissions, their absurd, economy-wrecking, job-destroying emissions reduction. And it's very timely, Deputy Speaker, that the Assistant Minister for Climate Change comes into the chamber, because he may be able to inform us what Labor's plan is to reduce emissions in the domestic aviation sector. Now, we've recently seen a lot of debate in the UK where Heathrow Airport has gone down the track and they said that they are having a third new runway. And is any wonder, Deputy Speaker, as we look at around the world, they're talking about the number of passengers on international flights are set to double between now and 2030 or 2040. But an interesting comment during the debate on Heathrow, Deputy Speaker, was a gentleman called Leo Murray, a director of the campaign group of fellow travellers. And he said, Deputy Speaker, and I quote, "If Britain moves to a net zero 2050 target to honour the Paris Agreement, all domestic flights will pretty much need to end immediately." Now, I'd like to know, is that the policy of the Australian Labor Party? Do they want more Australians to fly domestically or less? Because if you are having, Deputy Speaker, I apologise, through the chair, if the Australian Labor Party want to have a policy of a 45% reduction, emissions reduction target, over and above what we already have, Deputy Speaker, and we should remember, our Paris target is already per capita the most onerous in the world. It's the most onerous in the world per capita. I hear the interjection again from the member for climate change. Well, I would like to, maybe he could inform the House at some time later tonight. I'd like him to inform the House later tonight if he could tell us which nation per capita has a higher emissions reduction target than Australia. Any answer? Of course no answer, Deputy Speaker, because he knows it's correct. The highest emissions reduction target per capita in the world, and the Labor Party say that is not enough. We want to make it even higher. We want that 45% emissions reduction target. So what will that do to domestic aviation? How many people do they want to deny the right to fly in Australia? How do you want to reduce it? Deputy Speaker, this is the debate that we should be having. The Labor Party cannot hide behind these numbers, these feel-good numbers, without explaining what effect it will have on each sector of the economy. And I would hope during this debate, Deputy Speaker, on aviation and the Western Sydney Airport, that the Labor Party take the opportunity and they tell the Australian citizens how many people they want to deny the right to fly, because that is what their policy will result in, Deputy Speaker. And we also have, Deputy Speaker, the issue of international air travel. We know, Deputy Speaker, that while domestic air travel is a major part of our emissions profile, I've got some numbers here from 2016. We had 7.1 million Australians flew domestically for leisure and travel, but 5.3 million Australians actually flew overseas for holidays, Deputy Speaker. For business, it was 2.1 million Australians for business domestically, but 628,000 Australians flew overseas for business. Now, if you look at the flights, I'd say the average flight internally in Australia may be in Sydney, Melbourne, Melbourne, Brisbane, maybe Adelaide, Sydney, Deputy Speaker, will probably average around about an hour and a half. But those international flights, Deputy Speaker, I would say would average 8 to 10 to 12 hours on average from overseas. So our emissions from our international flights will be far, far greater than our emissions from our domestic flights. So again, I ask members of the Labor Party if they want to pursue their 45% emissions reduction target, that economy-wrecking, job-destroying emissions reduction target, what is their policy on international aviation? How many Australians will they want to deny the right to fly overseas, Deputy Speaker? One of the great privileges of being an Australian today, Deputy Speaker, is the opportunities that Australians have to travel overseas, to experience different cultures, different lands, Deputy Speaker, to travel and see the world. Well, members of the Labor Party, with their emission reduction target, want to take that opportunity away from Australians. You should explain your policy in full. How will you reduce your emissions? What are your plans? How many less Australians will have to travel, have the right and opportunity to travel overseas under your reckless, economy-destroying 45% emissions reduction target? Deputy Speaker, I bet you that we will hear nothing from them. Because if they explain their policies, if they let Australians know that the harm that they are going to inflict on them, the rights that they are going to take away from them, Deputy Speaker, the Labor Party, Deputy Speaker, will be consigned to electoral history. So they will fudge it. They'll continue to talk about feel-good numbers, Deputy Speaker, and they'll continue to rant and rave, Deputy Speaker, as we have seen. So this is a fantastic opportunity, Deputy Speaker. This bill gives every member of the Labor Party a chance to stand up either at the dispatch box or at their position in this House and explain to the Australian public how many Australians they want to deny the right to fly domestically and how many Australians they want to deny the right to fly internationally, because that is exactly what their policy is. We hope, Deputy Speaker. I will leave my remarks there to make sure that I give the members sitting on the other side of the House ample opportunity to explain those things to the Australian public.